as that, you're welcome here. Make yourself at home.
Good morning, everybody. Well, it's good morning for me because I am in Auckland, New Zealand, and it's 7 a.m. Most of you appear to be on the other side of the world where it's probably around 8 p.m. So good evening. My name is Scott Matheson. I am the co-founder of Working In, and I'm here with some esteemed colleagues to tell you how you can immigrate to New Zealand. It's a deep, dark winter at the moment, but we're heading into spring soon, and I understand that you guys are all in summer. So we're up for 40 minutes here tonight, and we're going to cover off a huge amount of ground. I'm going to introduce you to my colleagues now. Firstly, over in the UK, Paul Goddard. Paul, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to see you on here. My name's Paul. I actually moved to New Zealand with my family back in 2003 and then became a licensed immigration advisor in around, I don't know, early 2010, 12, something like that, and have been helping people move pretty much for the last 15 years. And it's great to see you all on here, and look forward to sharing some information with you.
Thanks, Paul, and we'll cover off a little bit about what being a licensed immigration advisor means. It's very important for everybody who's listening. Our next panelist is back in Auckland, Monique Power. If you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Hi guys, thanks Scott. So I'm proudly born in New Zealand to Dutch migrant parents. I've experienced life in both countries and now consider New Zealand my home. I've always been fascinated and very interested in immigration, and I'm truly passionate about helping people. So my job is really to show you how and where to start on your journey to this beautiful country, and I look forward to hearing your story and helping you.
Awesome. Thank you, Monique. And then all the way back to the UK is Paul Arthur, our relocations expert. Paul.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Another Paul to get confused with, but I've been in migration now for 25 years. Understand exactly what's involved, understand the complications. I don't get involved in visas or recruitment. I look after the relocation side of your move to New Zealand. Once you've got your visa, once you've got the job, it's a big journey, and we've tried to do as much as we can to make the relocation and your resettlement as smooth and as straightforward as possible.
Thank you very much, Paul. And now I'm going to be bringing up a screen about life in New Zealand. It's not like this every day, but I can tell you this is some photos of Petra's husband, who works at Working In, and they live on the other side of the harbour. And every now and again, this is how he commutes to work. I can tell you it doesn't do it every day. I'm not talking it up too much. But I guess the nice thing about New Zealand is, we do have a lifestyle, and we do have a work-life balance. And I think that is the attraction point of New Zealand, and it's why most people are interested in coming to here. So a little bit about Working In before we get into the detail of actually how you can move. We are licensed immigration advisors based in Auckland, but we have people in around the world, like the UK and South Africa, who can help you with your move. We are a relatively large team for New Zealand standards, and that's our team there. But at the same time, we feel as though we're small enough to add a very personal service and a bespoke service, because every single one of you has a different story and a different journey ahead of you. Okay, so just quickly on this webinar, as I said, we have 40 minutes, so there's a lot to cover off. So a quick overview on where we are at with the borders. Believe it or not, New Zealand borders have not opened yet. 31st of July is actually when they officially open. And where do you start? Paul Goddard will talk a lot about this. Can you make the move? That's really important. Why waste time if you can't? But if you can, let's keep going. How do you actually do that? What's your first step? How do you actually get the traction? What sort of information do you need? And what tools do you need? And identifying and overcoming barriers. So there are barriers on this journey. It is not easy. On this webinar alone, I think we've got close to 100 years of experience. So we kind of know what is in store for you and how to avoid some of those problems. And then we've got a chat. So please chuck in your questions. We'll do our very best to answer them, and just keep them coming. If we can't answer them right now, it's because they're too specific and they're too much about you personally. We can actually talk about that offline later. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And really, really, really good to have you on board. Now, Paul is a licensed immigration advisor working in, has one of the largest teams of licensed immigration advisors in New Zealand. We have 18 or 19 at the moment. So Paul, can you just explain why people should be using a licensed immigration advisor, especially with these changes in immigration?
Yeah, look, I mean, licensed immigration advisors, obviously like ourselves, have been around for a while. The reason it's so important is, there's so many more things to the move than just getting a job offer and a visa. The saying is the devil's always in the detail. As licensed immigration advisors, you have to go through a process of training. You have to get qualified now. It's like a year long or even longer than that, I think, course that you have to do. You have to do continuous professional development to keep on top of everything. It's an ever-growing, developing situation. Immigration policy is constantly changing, and we've seen the biggest changes in the last 20 years happen in the last 6 months, and there's more changes to come. And the advantages of using a licensed advisor is the licensed advisor's job is to know everything that's happening and be able to put you in the best position and put your application in the best way possible to minimize the risks and help you through the process. Because if you choose not to use a licensed immigration advisor, you're going into this on your own, you're going into it in the dark. There's lots of information you just simply can't access that advisors can. And I could go on for hours of why to use an advisor, but don't make the mistake. And I see a lot of people do this. They think that getting a visa is just about filling out a form. Anybody can fill out a form. It's not about filling out a form. It's the evidence that goes with the form. It's the way that evidence is presented. It's making sure it's put across in the best way possible. It's what does the employer do to help you? There's so many moving parts to this process. Filling out a form is actually a very small part of that. And don't make that mistake.
And I think you mentioned a very critical part of this, which is the employer side of things. We're going to be talking a little bit about that and the job and the changes that have happened in New Zealand, which got implemented on July the 4th, which unfortunately have made it a little bit more difficult to come to New Zealand because there's a lot more obligation on the employers now. And we'll sort of guide you through that. And I think the other thing about licensed immigration advisors, as I put up on the screen, is that, you're registered with the New Zealand Immigration Advisors Authority. They have a code of conduct which they must abide by. And any monies that you paid is put into a client fund until that work is actually done. So it's an insurance policy really for you. So that's really critical whether you use us or not. I think it's really, really critical that you should be aware that you don't want to be talking to somebody who's not licensed. Okay, that's our kind of sort of warning. So give us a minute about New Zealand, Paul, and actually I might even talk to you, Monique, because you're based here. Post-COVID environment. How are you feeling? What's the job market like? Are there a lot of opportunities? What's the unemployment rate like?
The unemployment rate here in New Zealand at the moment is around the 3%. It's historic lows at the moment. There's massive opportunities at the moment for people with the right occupations to come to New Zealand. We speak to lots of people in the workplace, and they're all saying, that the candidate pool is very low in New Zealand. It's dried up. It's time to open up our borders and get the skilled migrants back into the country. So lots of opportunities across lots of different sectors.
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about COVID, everybody, is that New Zealand closed its borders. People went home or they weren't able to come in. And of course, the New Zealanders started taking all the jobs that the migrants were taking. But then, of course, we've got to this point where no one else can take those jobs and we're absolutely desperate. Every day we're talking to employers who are needing people. The demand for skills is absolutely intense. And this is an amazing opportunity for you as somebody who wants to move here, because our immigration system is fully predicated on a job offer. And without the job offer, you are unable to get a work visa, and the work visa is your pathway to residency if you actually meet that criteria. So, Paul, if we can just bring up this, can you see the slide here on the new visa? Paul, got it?
Yeah.
So if you could just sort of run through the new accredited employer work visa and what that means.
Yeah, so essentially the new accredited employer work visa was brought in, as Scott said, really recently. And the sort of thought process behind it is that New Zealand immigration want to check these employers out who want to offer people jobs from overseas. So what they're really checking is this a good employer? Have they got good HR practices? Are they sustainable and going to be around for years? Are they paying the right salaries? So the thought process behind this is it's there to protect you as migrants who are coming to New Zealand. These employers have been pre-approved. We're just getting into it in the past few weeks. There's a number of steps that are involved in it, and I don't want to bore everyone with what those steps are, but essentially there's a part of, you apply and say, well, this is me and this is my business and this is what I do. And they go, yeah, that looks great. One of the areas that is proving a little bit tricky is what they call a job check. And this is where every employer, not only do they have to say, we want to hire people from overseas, they have to say which people they want to hire from overseas. What is the kind of the exact skills and experience that they want for that role that they're trying to fill. They have to say how many roles they want to fill. So it does go down into these levels of details. And I think some employers are struggling a little bit with that at the moment, knowing what to do. The good news around employer accreditation is every employer that wants to offer you a job has to be accredited. However, if you're working with us, we can help employers get accredited. So in other words, a lot of our clients and people we work with are talking to employers who aren't yet accredited, and we're able to then step in and talk to that employer and say, look, if you want this person, we can help you get accredited. We can help you formulate the job check so it ticks all the boxes, matches the criteria. This is becoming, I would say it's becoming essential. If you haven't got somebody who can step in and do what I've just described, then you are just pretty much wasting your time. If your employment strategy is to fire off CVs to jobs you see advertised online, then good luck, because you're firing off CVs 9 times out of 10 to employers who aren't accredited, don't know what accreditation is, and even if they do, aren't sure how it works. It's far better to go through us because we know how it works. We can step in and we can talk to the employer. So I don't want to dwell too much in the detail of how they get it, but essentially that's what it is. Does that make sense, Scott? Does that work?
Yeah, look, I think the way that we see it is it's a 3-stage process, Paul, basically how you explain it. And an employer has to become accredited to hire a person offshore on a work visa. So that's number one. You can only actually get a job offer through an accredited employer. The applications for the accredited employer only opened up in May. And so the first employers are only just starting to actually receive their accreditation. So that's stage one. Stage two is the job check. So, for example, I can see somebody here saying, I'm a construction manager. Can I get a job? Yes, the answer is, but the employer must be accredited. And then second, they must apply for a job check through the government to say, have I checked to see if any New Zealanders can do this job? And if not, yes, I get essentially a token which says I can employ a construction manager in this city at this hourly rate. And so that's stage two, the job check. And stage three is your individual application. And it's called it's a 3-step process. And I think you're absolutely right. In these early days, Paul, it's very difficult for these people that are on the webinar to know whether or not an employer is accredited or whether they have a job check. So we're in a transitory time where we're moving from one policy to another. But I guess preparation is everything, because I guess the thing about immigration is that it just doesn't start now and finish at the job offer. I mean, it goes all the way through to where you're landing. In fact, Paul Arthur, you'll attest to this. I mean, you're the expert in relocation. What do you say about relocation, and when should people start thinking about this if they're committed to coming to New Zealand?
It's about planning and preparation, like lots of things, really. The key time is once somebody has actually secured a job offer, because they know roughly when and where in New Zealand they're going to go to. But often when Paul, somebody signs up with Paul for help and support with the visa, I often give people a call at the very beginning, just to have a chat, just to explain what we do, just to explain how it works. And I think the feedback I get from lots of people, it makes them feel comfortable and confident, more confident than they were when they first started, because you're not just left on your own. If you haven't emigrated before, and most people haven't, who do you talk to? Who can you trust? My job is to make sure that we're connecting approved, reputable companies who you can use with absolute confidence. So, next to getting the job and getting the visa, the most important thing is to be able to get into New Zealand as smoothly and as safely as you possibly can. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right as well, isn't it, Paul? And there's that, we'll go through the sort of services that we have, but I like that whole thing that you've got an assurance that you're not alone. I mean, doing this alone is probably the most challenging thing, isn't it? So look, I think, go on.
I was just going to say, in the UK, it's a fact that moving home is one of the most stressful things you can ever do in your life. But when you're moving 12,000 miles, it's a completely different ballgame. So the more help and support and advice you can take, the better off I think you'll find it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And so I think, Paul Goddard, one of the things that we see is people spend a lot of time doing research online and not really moving forward. And we've also got this whole conundrum around the catch-22, we call it, don't we? How do you get a visa if you need a job? How do you get a job if you don't have a visa? And I can see these comments here from people saying, hey, listen, I'm in the UAE. How do I get a job offer when I'm in the UAE or the UK? I mean, how do we do that? So how do you start moving forward, Paul?
Yeah, there's a couple of points there, Scott. Yes, the internet, it's wonderful, but it's not personalized. It's not about you and your move. It's just pages of information. You have to understand that. There's a lot of information on the internet, but finding the right information that's about you and your move is almost impossible. It takes hundreds of hours of spinning round and round in circles, kind of going nowhere. We see that all the time. You do need personalized information to help you make the move. You've also got to be prepared for the move before you start applying for jobs. This is a really big tip, if you like, for people who are on this webinar. Don't start applying for jobs unless you've got everything in place ready to go for when that job offer is secured, because if it's not ready to go, it's all going to fall apart. And the catch-22 exists because employers generally don't see a clear way forward when they get a CV from overseas. So in other words, what it means is you can't get a visa because you haven't got a job offer, but you can't get a job offer because you haven't got a visa. And that exists because if I'm an employer in New Zealand and you just send me your CV, I'm busy running my business in New Zealand. I've advertised for somebody. I look at your CV. I say, wow, this person looks amazing. CV's great, but they're overseas. I don't know anything about visas. I'm an employer. I'm just busy running my business. I don't know if this person's going to get here. I don't know when they're going to get here. I don't know how they're going to get here. I don't know what I need to do to help them get here. There's this endless list of reasons for me not to engage. Your CV doesn't tell the employer what they need to know. There's a big piece missing. We can put that piece in there for you. It's what we call employment support, and we can do that. But it's really important. Just don't just fire off CVs. It's got a success rate of less than 2%. There is a much better way to do this. You are in competition with New Zealanders. You're in competition with millions of people around the world who want to move to New Zealand. You've got to be doing more than those people. You've got to be doing better than those people. And It takes time and effort. We do not go out and get you a job offer. Let's make that very, very clear. That's not what we do for people. That would be wonderful, but that's not the real world. In the real world, you are the best people to be talking to employers and engaging with employers. What we do is we give you the tools to do it, and at the same time, remove the risks and barriers that stop the employer engaging you. That's why we call it support. It's support. And it works. But it's not easy, and it's not quick for a lot of people. Some people it is. You have to go into this expecting it to be long, difficult, and frustrating, because anything worthwhile in life is. Everything has a risk attached to it. Everything has a cost attached to it. If it's worthwhile, we're here to minimize the risks, maximize the opportunities. And it's really important. Don't just fire off CVs. If you want to know how to move forward, we can help you through that process.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that's all true. Look, it is increasingly difficult. I can see someone, Patty. Thank you, Patty, for posting. There is a catch-22, and Monique, you've obviously been talking to him. I guess that's probably a good segue into asking you, Monique, if people are in this situation, what do you propose for people to do if they want to take this next step forward? Over to you, Monique.
First, there will be a short appraisal form where we collect some very basic data from you. So like name, age, occupation, your highest qualification, and that of your partner, and if there are any children migrating with you. So that gives us a little bit of an idea. If you have the right occupation and the matching qualifications, that could potentially give you a successful move to New Zealand. Once you've got that information, you may be invited to book a 15 to 30 minute call with me or one of my colleagues, and we'll go through the whole process with you. We talk a little bit more about something called My Visa Path. My Visa Path is a full assessment of your eligibility to move to New Zealand. It's also an opportunity for us to ask you lots of questions that we understand your reasons to move, when, what, how, why New Zealand. It's really important that we know that. And then we can send you the link to My Visa Path, where we collect a lot more information. So it's a lot more in depth. You can also attach your CV to that assessment form, and we will send you out a report. And once you've got that report, you then click on the link to book another Zoom meeting with a licensed immigration advisor. Together you go through the report, make sure you understand that you're happy with the outcome, and also your opportunity to ask lots of questions. They don't always have to be visa related. Some of you have maybe never been to our country before and would like to know more about maybe the way of life in New Zealand, or the education system in New Zealand for your children. But we also explain the total cost of immigration. So there's not going to be any surprises, no hidden costs, and you can budget for your move.
Thank you, Monique. So I'm just going to ask Theo to bring up the screen. So this is what you've been talking about here, Monique, which is the step one to find out if you're eligible. We've set up a free appraisal to give you clarity on whether you can make the move or not. What you've said is that if you complete that form now, it's absolutely free, and we will look at that and assess and make a very brief assessment on whether we think that you will be able to make the move. So this is all about saving you cost and time, because we don't want to give people false hope. That's just ridiculous. There's no point in doing that. We've been around for 20 years. We're not in the game of false hope. We're in the game of help and support. Once you have done that eligibility assessment, then you can talk to Monique, and then there's the possibility of doing this full assessment, which we're bringing up on screen now. That's called My Visa Path. And Monique would be talking to you about that. That is the detailed plan that she was discussing. Now, there is a cost for that. It's 300 New Zealand dollars, but you get a 12, 15-page report, something like that. Is that right, Monique? I mean, it's very, very robust. Yeah. And once you've got that, that's your report. No matter what happens, that is your document. That is your bespoke individual pathway to New Zealand and how that can be done. And I think the best part about getting that report is that you have an hour with Paul or another licensed immigration advisor to ask all those personal questions, which we can't cover on a webinar like this, unfortunately, because we're all so different. And then I think the final part of this, Monique, is, how to get a job when you're not in New Zealand. One of the things we do have, Paul, right, so there's two Pauls on here. So yes, Paul, you have made it they have made it confusing. Is that we do have an employment portal. It means that once you're at that point, maybe Paul, you can explain what this portal is and what information it's got in there.
Yeah, the portals are something that we've been working on, and like a lot of things, we're constantly evolving these things as borders are opening and we're transitioning, like Scott said. But there's a lot of stuff that we do when you become a client that is online, so that you don't just have to rely on waiting for an email or a phone call, etc. Of course, we can do those things, but we've given you, or we give our clients, access to online portals where they can get information on employment support, what your CV should look like, CV templates. You can watch videos about how to do things and things like that. Even stuff like getting you information ready to save you trawling all over the internet. We make a lot of videos explaining things. That's better than sending you to a website where you're going to get even more confused than you were before. And the portals really are aimed to do that, to give clients 24/7 access to accurate information and tools to help you actually move forward and secure a job offer.
Thanks, Paul. Look, there's a lot of questions here around jobs. Look, I think, all I can say is that the clients that we're working with are hiring anyone from GPs and nurses and midwives to carpenters, steel fixers, concrete workers, truck drivers, even labourers. There's a real desperation, actually. So, and most employers don't understand immigration, and they definitely don't understand the new policy. So once we get you to a point where we think that you're ready to actually start applying for jobs, part of what Paul's just talked about in terms of the portal is that we provide you with letters of support. We try and introduce ourselves to the employers. Part of our role is to educate those employers, and if they're not accredited, assist them with their accreditation if they want. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot of stuff that we do in the background. We, as a business, mainly we help employers. That's our number one thing. So we're very connected with the employers, but we're obviously not connected with every employer in the country. So there is some challenges right now, but it doesn't mean that if you're skilled that you won't get a job. It's just exactly what Paul Goddard has been saying, is how do you get that job? Once you do have the job and we start working on your visa, then everything's in motion, and then you really have to get into this relocation phase. There's a screen here around the relocation, the different partners that we work with. Can you just sort of talk us through a bit more specifically about the partners that we use that will help the people that are listening today?
Yeah, we work with a whole range of specialist companies who are experts or market leaders in their particular area of business. For instance, you need a bank account. Most people would need a bank account before they even leave their home country and arrive in New Zealand. We have arrangements with the Bank of New Zealand, one of the biggest banks. They can open the account for you before you arrive in New Zealand. So that's one thing. So you can give your new account number to your new employer. You're on their payroll. You get paid promptly. There's no delays. We work with currency brokers who can get you the best possible exchange rates. So when you're moving to New Zealand, you're going to be buying some New Zealand dollars. You may have sold your property and have a huge sum to move over. The currency brokers will get you a far better exchange rate than any bank will give you. We help organize removals. So whether it's a single box or a complete home, cars, motorbikes, pets. Anybody who's thinking of taking pets, You just need to be aware and plan. It's going to take you about 7 months before the pet is going to be ready to fly to New Zealand. There's lots of vaccinations and boosters which are needed. We have some excellent pet shippers who will connect with you, and they'll give you all the help, advice and information you need. Then they organise the transport and the quarantine in New Zealand. We help with moving pensions, people who've leaving property in the UK or they need tax advice. We organise that. We organise mobile telephone SIM cards. We organise cars. So if you want to buy a car when you arrive in New Zealand, we can introduce you to car dealers. You know, if you wanted to rent a car, we can help you with that too.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, it's quite an amazing end-to-end service, isn't it? We're very grateful for the work that you've done in establishing all these partners that we've known well for most of them for well over 20 years. They're long time players in the industry. Paul Goddard, I think the sort of the big thing here is that almost anybody who's on this webinar will be looking for residency in New Zealand. I mean, that's the pathway that we talk about. That's what people are wanting. Coming over here on a work visa, 12,000 miles, maybe when you're young and free is okay. At which point you can sort of, you might want a working holiday visa, but if you're serious about moving your family over, then residency is what we're after. So, Paul Goddard, how does residency work once you've got your job offer?
Yeah, so once you've got the job offer, you'll initially get what we call an accredited employer work visa. Pretty self-explanatory. It's an accredited employer offering you a job, you get a work visa. That's not based on points, and that isn't residency. So for most people, that's a 3-year temporary visa. What we will do once the skilled migrant category residence visa opens, it's not quite open yet, and we're hoping somewhere around September is what we're looking at. Once you've got a job offer in place, we can also lodge the skilled migrant category residence visa. So you do need the job offer. The job offer unlocks both visas. The skilled migrant category residence visa is the visa that's based on points. At the moment, the points are 160 that you have to reach to be able to lodge that visa. It's a much bigger application than the temporary visas. It's one residence visa for the whole family, if you're a family. So unlike the work visas, it's not individual visas for each person that is linked. It's one visa that can include the whole family. There's children can actually be included up until the age of 24, as long as they're at home and dependent on you, i.e. not working and living at home ideally, which is interesting. Doesn't include grandparents and things like that. That's totally separate visas, but the whole sort of immediate family. And it can take a while to be processed. There is a new green list that can be fast-tracked with a 12-month processing period. If you're not on the green list, doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. You'll still get residence. It will just take a bit longer to come through. But the way you move is you get the job offer, you get a temporary visa for 3 years, and you have the peace of mind that your residence is being processed in the background. That's the way we do it. That's the way you should do it. Don't waste time lodging an expression of interest and doing all those things now without a job offer in place. It's pointless.
Absolutely. So yeah, there is a different pathway for residency, and that will be included in your report. I still see more comments coming up. Someone said, hey, look, is there any jobs for admin assistants? I think generally people who are listening today, the higher the skill, the more likely that you will be able to get a job, because for the employer, the onus is on the employer to prove to Immigration New Zealand that they cannot find a New Zealander to do the job. That's what immigration settings are all about. The immigration policy is set so that we can bring in, as a country, people that we can't find locally. So the employer has to go through a test and say, I've looked all around my, my local area, and I cannot find an admin assistant. Okay. Now it's much easier for an employer to go, I cannot find a GP, or a project director for a major construction company. It will be much more difficult for them to prove to Immigration New Zealand, I can't find an admin assistant. So it's probably not impossible, but you have to bear in mind that the lower the skill level, the more difficult and more challenging it will be to have the employer prove to New Zealand immigration that they can't find someone locally. And that's essentially the test, Paul. I mean, you're the licensed immigration advisor. Is that how you view it?
Oh, absolutely, Scott. I think it's a really interesting thing when you think about it. It's not New Zealand immigration's job or aim isn't to issue visas. And that might sound a bit weird, but it's not. Their role is to protect New Zealanders' jobs. That's what they're there for. People will always want to come to New Zealand and live in New Zealand and work in New Zealand. New Zealand immigration is there to protect New Zealanders' jobs. In other words, has every effort been made to hire a New Zealander? There's, are there, like you say, New Zealanders readily available who can do this job? They've made it very clear, especially with the recent changes to policy. There's always going to be a route forward for skilled migrants. That's clear. The government have said that. Whatever changes they make, there's always going to be a way to get residence as a skilled migrant. But if you're a lower skilled migrant, it's going to be more difficult. That's just the honest reality. We don't sugarcoat things here. There's no point, like you say, selling false hope. It is what it is. Every case is different and you can't rule anything out, but that is the way that the system is moving. It's moving more in that direction now, probably than it ever has done in the past, I would say.
Yeah, but the job, Eddie, does not need to be on a skills shortage list. The skills shortage list is there, but you do not have to be on the skills shortage list. So everyone, it doesn't mean that you are precluded from applying if you're not on the skills shortage list. That is
the answer there is, sorry, Scott, you delayed there. The answer to that is, if you're not sure about lists and where you are and all this, and you're thinking, oh, is that right? Talk to us, get an assessment with us. That's what we do. We can look at your skills and we can match it to whatever criteria is, today, and then go, right, this is where you are right now. And this is where you're going to be for the next however months time. That's the easiest way to do it. Stop spinning around on the internet. It doesn't work.
Thank you, Paul. And we do actually start wrapping up now. So, Paul, Arthur, have you got any last words before we leave and say goodbye to everybody?
Thank you for joining us, and I hope it's been useful and helpful. I think the message from all of us is, it's a huge, big thing you're doing. You're only going to do it once. You need to get proper professional help, because there's an old-fashioned saying, doing it right will cost you less in the end. And I think that's the message I'd like to give you.
Very wise words there. And Monique.
Yeah, I think what Paul just said, it is a massive step, immigration, and we just want to make sure you make an informed decision. Here at Working In, the majority of us are migrants, so that's quite nice to know that we're migrants helping migrants. And I think you see the link there on your screen. If you want to get started, just fill out that free appraisal form. If you have got an occupation that is something that the New Zealand government is looking for, then you'll get to speak to me for about 15 to 30 minutes. So let's just get started. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Monique. Yeah, and there's a few questions around timelines. That free form, the free eligibility, will probably come back to you within 48 hours. We get hundreds a day, and they're not automated. We have a person, Liz, who looks at every single one. She gets about 400 to 500 a day. So we get through those and back to you within 48 hours. Full assessment, around 10 days turnaround at the moment. So that's not too bad, more or less. And again, very high volume coming through, and they take us between 2 and 3 hours to put together. So it's quite intense work from one of our senior licensed immigration advisors. So there's quite a lot of work involved. Okay, so look, we're 1 minute over. I don't like being late because everybody's got to go to their meals and put their kids to bed and whatever it might be. So I'm going to wrap up now. I'm also just going to show you a few photos as we go. We're going to keep the chat open. Paul will keep answering questions if he can. And I'm just going to show you some photos of New Zealand. I said before, it's all about lifestyle for us. It's all about the beach and the family. And as we go, we'll just bring up some screens and you can have a look at those. And otherwise, it's good morning or good evening from us. Goodbye.
Bye.